It was Kayla. It was on
Okay, it is 7:04 on July 23rd, and I will call the regular city council meeting to order at 7:05. Will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming and welcome. I'm sure that we will be very entertaining this evening. First thing on our agenda is number 4, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
I think I sent 1 or 2 changes to Eve. I can move to approve the minutes with those changes. I don't know if anybody else had anything.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes stand approved as corrected. Mayor and council reports. Kaylin, would you like to go first tonight?
Sure.
We're going to shake it up a little bit.
Ooh, cutting loose. I attended a Zero Waste Coalition meeting today. So this is a group that's been somewhat dormant, but trying to coordinate the different nonprofits that are in town working on waste issues, so we don't duplicate efforts and can work more collaboratively and efficiently. I attended the taxation town hall on Saturday, as did many of you. It was very well attended and lots of impressively informed representatives of various entities speaking on to their various issues about the potential changes in the state tax code, which have potentially dramatic effects throughout the community. And Curtis Wells and I have been meeting to discuss a strategy for advancing congestion management in Arches National Park. And what we are moving towards is working with a consultant who is primarily advises concessionaires in publicly owned parks, federal and state, and it would be a 2-day conference where the authors of various studies would come and sort of refresh us as to what they looked at, their conclusions, how they got there, have the opportunity to answer public. Representatives from the national park, different parks, as well as the Denver office would speak to their experiences with travel management and the evolving interagency visitor management framework. And then there would be an opportunity to float the ideas that have been proposed for capacity, increasing capacity at Arches, and have more of a dialogue, and hopefully maybe move the dialogue forward as far as like what makes sense in the short to midterm, as well as possible long-term strategies that best meet the needs of the park as well as the community. That's what I've got.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
I attended with Joel a Moab Community Child Care and Daycare Solution meeting, and Joel might comment on it a little bit, but it's a committee committed to safe and accessible child care through collaborations with different government and state entities for child care for 0 to 2-year-old children, which there's 200 children in our community, and there's only 8 spaces available in Grand County, and there are no availability. There's no availability for any spaces, so we are looking at how we can potentially help create childcare for 0 to 2. And then I went to go check on my parents for a week, and that was it.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
We had a vulnerability and consequences related to drought workshop that the city participated in, as well as other entities here in the area. And it was useful, among other things, just for all the players to talk to each other one more time. We all see this stuff coming. The bottom line on climate prediction for this, yes, Chuck Williams gave us the latest rounds of Ken Colm. He's a consultant, whom has been doing a water study for us, the budget portion of it, and he revised and fixed some other earlier mistakes, and I took still a more closer look at it. I get a little smarter the more I go, and I still think there are some problems with it. I'll just keep that short. So we'll see what happens to that. And finally, in the sales tax seminar that was so well attended, the town hall that Kalen mentioned, I was happy to hear at least one of the members of the board actually use the word, we'll have to grandfather Moab in, or some sort of thing. I mean, at least they're beginning to get cognizant of the fact that sales tax is a big deal, and there's something like 16 resort communities in Utah, and they're all going to take serious hits. So that's beginning to sink in, at least to the people that were there. So I thought that was great.
Thank you, Mike. Ronnie?
Okay, let's see. Sorry, it was a busy period, so I will try not to get too lengthy, but I attended the July 11th Housing Task Force meeting, and I will just mention some updates briefly just because I think they're exciting for the community. Let's see. Community Rebuild is now working on their twin home and 2 single homes, on that corner of Mill Creek and Sandplatz. And they're aiming to make all 4 of those meet the Living Building Challenge. They have a new intern, Lisa Jaffe, as well. Zachariah reported from the county, among other things, that the affordable housing plan will need an update this year. I think that has more to do with some of the data in there. He noted the county is updating their assured housing ordinance, and there'll be some administrative changes to clarify procedures and requirements. They're updating the high-density housing overlay. One of the things that happened there is the provision for retirees went back in. The first project under the HDHO, that overlay is coming before them at, I believe, 40 units on Spanish Valley Drive, and then another 224 units behind the Wyndham on Starbuck. And the group of folks at the meeting were interested on an update from the city if we had one. I didn't know anything, but somebody can fill me in. Or if you go, Kayla, next time, they were interested in an update on anything happening with housing on the Sitla USU land. I wanted to thank Nora for coming and offering a city update. We did mention that we have 5 responses to the Walnut Lane RFP, and Nora noted that 2 projects have submitted funds for the fee in lieu of construction under the Assured Housing Ordinance. Under HAZU, this is exciting. There's a new VISTA working for them in the Land Trust, who will be working to support the Housing Task Force, but also largely on deed restrictions. HAZU has all kinds of exciting stuff going on. Groundbreaking for the 36-unit senior apartment MAPS project, probably August 1st. They just got funds for 20 more self-help homes, which is impressive too. Their 10th grant for this, and whereas there have been periods for self-help where there weren't many families lining up, there are 112 people on the waiting list for that now. And they've been doing some open houses. And then just under the Moab Area Community Land Trust, if I got this right, hopefully their preliminary plat got approval from the County Planning Commission and will next go to the County Council for PUD approval. Next, we move on to the July 15th EMS Special Service District meeting. If people didn't know, one of the challenges the district is having right now is a high volume of calls from Green River. And while the district prioritizes care here, they will not turn down a call if they can if they have the manpower to respond to Green River. It is a problem, though, because the Green River calls are going up in volume, and you do get a certain number of calls that then get canceled, and you're an hour out, an hour back. So the board and the staff are working on figuring out what to do about that. EMS is also in the process of surplusing some equipment, so good news for the fire district and the city police department, who will each be getting a vehicle out of that. I attended the July 18th presentation at the library on the history of the great floods of the Colorado and Green Rivers. And if you thought this would be dry, this professor, Vic Baker, is highly entertaining, so I recommend anybody catch him the next go-round. But some of the takeaways from that are that the conventional way that we're collecting data in hydrology has some holes in it, whereas you can really help use paleo flood data that's looking at really old floods in the last thousands of years to help fill in some gaps. And so just one takeaway for us is the historical high in our area, 300,000 cubic feet per second flood. And while a lot of us have been paying attention to drought, it's also important to be aware of flooding. And the extreme flood risk for the upper Colorado Basin has been greatly underestimated. And he had some interesting maps of what it looks like when this town sees 300 CFS and who's underwater and who isn't. Everybody's mentioned the task force. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. It's a great turnout, and I wanted to thank Rachel and Kaylin for speaking on behalf of the city and for all the great educational materials. If anybody hasn't caught up on that, I have to say, watching videos, the two best ones I've seen are the ones Rachel posted from the Utah League of Towns, and the Stronger Futures video that the task force actually put together does a really good job of explaining. The final thing was we had our quarterly UMTRA meeting for the tailings pile today, and we've now moved 61%, well, 61.5% of the estimated 16 million tons of tailings. And we have also removed 5,000 pounds of uranium from the groundwater system. And let's see what else. When we were able to raise the funding back up to $45 million a year through lobbying efforts, we were able to rehire 23 people. And I know some people wonder, like, do they come from out of town? What's happening? 12 of them were from the county here, and another 6 from other parts of Utah, and the other ones from elsewhere. But the great thing about it is a lot of people who'd been doing that work before were able to be rehired, so it saves you time on training. And for anyone who's trying to get in touch with the project, there is a new federal deputy cleanup director, and that's Sasha Robertson, and she is living in Moab. And last thing on that project is starting to move more of the debris, so that's the metal and the building parts that you see when you go down the Potash Road. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I attended the HASU board meeting, but Ronnie hit most of the highlights, so I don't think there was an awful lot more. They do have an awful lot going on, and they've got some really exciting things happening. The families in Blanding that are doing the self-help program are finishing up their work, and they should have an open house August 22nd. There is a rehab on Apache Drive that is in the process of being fixed up to be habitable, and that will soon be, I do believe that one will be rented out to someone. And I think that's it on the Housing Authority Board. I attended a museum board meeting. A lot of their information was just administrative. They are working on returning the pieces and the artifacts that were in the museum back together, pulling the stories together that they want to tell. They are also working on disaster plans, which they have to have in place to display certain items. And tomorrow evening from 6 until 8, they will have their annual ice cream social on the lawn, complete with music. So go get free ice cream. And I attended the tax reform meeting on Saturday also. Thursday evening, Pastor Pacheco has asked me to stand in again for the mayor. They will be having the Veterans Charity Ride at Swanee Park at 5:30. So if you would like to come say hello to some of our veterans that are riding through, and this is a restorative and a therapy ride, but there is a young lady at our very own Canyonlands Care Center who is 104 years old. That is a veteran who will be arriving via motorcycle. So, she said that she just needed help getting on and off. So, and that is all that I have been to. And we will move on to administrative reports. Joel?
So most of the stuff I attended has been spoken about, so I think we'll be quick tonight. I did attend the Tax Restructuring Equalization Task Force, and it went really, really well. I was really happy with how good it turned out. I want to thank the Utah Leagues of Cities and Towns for all that they've done for this community and helping us prepare for that and getting us the information that we needed. Cameron and Rachel have done an amazing job for this city, and I want to tell them thanks. I want to thank Mayor Bierman for coming down from Park City, and although he is one of our second residents, and we're happy to have him as a second resident, he came down and represented resort communities for us, and he did an amazing job as well, and representatives of Park City that attended with him. I want to thank Tawny and Kaylin and Rachel for representing the city and speaking and being heard, and I mainly want to thank the residents. They did an awesome job coming out in force. They spoke, and they spoke respectfully, and that goes a really long ways when dealing with the legislature. And when we're talking taxes, it's really easy to get emotional, and it's really easy to get upset, and it's understanding to get upset when it comes to that. And no one did. Everyone was extremely respectful, and that goes a long ways. We have already had contact from members of the league and members of the state representatives who were here in the last 2 days. And we've had contact on 3 major projects that we've been working on, and they're reaching out to us now and wanting to help. So I cannot emphasize how much that helps us when people are respectful and handle themselves appropriately. And you guys just did awesome. It was really great. So next week, we were going to have the police department give a little bit of a report and thank the EMS for a little bit of a project they've worked on together, but I got an email from a member of their board stating that the majority of their leadership was out of town. The chief is also out of town, so we decided that we would actually bump that until our next meeting, and we'll let the chief do that and when they can attend as well. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And speaking about being respectful, Senator Maine mentioned to me when I talked to her afterwards that Moab was the most respectful meeting that they had been to, that people generally were kind and thoughtful, and it didn't get heated or out of hand.
I've been to a lot of those meetings, and that was by far it was great. It was really good, so.
Okay. Alrighty, we are moving right along. I've got two papers for citizens to be heard. Are there some more? Okay. Alrighty, John McQueen. We're timing you this evening. If you'll flip one of those little timers over and.
A couple weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm John McQueen. I live on East 3rd South, and I sent all of you an email over the weekend about a situation with the weeds, the cheatgrass in the vacant lot next door to me. And yesterday I went out and took fresh pictures to bring to the meeting and stuff like that tonight. But yesterday at about 4:30 p.m., 2 guys arrived, and within about an hour had mowed the entire thing. They didn't clean the stuff up, but they'd mowed it, so it's now flat, and at least I think that's a little better as far as fire danger. I'm not sure what happened. I know one of you was talking about seeing if the city manager would intervene with the owner. I don't know if that happened, or whether Mona just didn't want to see my face in her office again, and, or maybe the property owner is trying to get it ready to sell or something like that. But you know, for now that problem is taken care of. But there's got to be a better way of dealing with this than having a neighbor come in with a complaint and have it sit there for a long time before a letter gets sent out, which is what's been happening. You know, it's danger situations are the ones that have to be corrected first. The thing that I mentioned, the RV that was illegally parked, or somebody was illegally living in it, and the code enforcement guy took care of that in the course of a day. But we've got, as you've pointed out also, Mike, all over town there's lots with cheatgrass. You suggested that maybe after a time the city should do it and then send them a bill. I know that in previous councils here, the idea has been floated to have a letter go out with a date, comply by this date, or the city moves in, takes the action, the mowing in this case, and then puts a lien on the property. I'd also put a hefty fine on it as well. But I do also understand that this was not, has not been approved in the past, so it's maybe something you could revisit.
We could revisit
Yeah.
that, okay.
So
Thank
John,
you for coming.
Okay,
So
thank
John, I
you.
want you to know I felt so guilty about the whole thing. I went out this morning and mowed 2 big weedy cheatgrass parcels on my own lot.
So guilt does work.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Sarah Melnikoff?
Hi, how are you all?
Good.
I would like to say that I always try to be very respectful and polite, and if I'm never perceived that way, it's by accident. I do respect all of you very much, and if I get passionate, that's on me, not on you. So if I have ever been offensive, I apologize. I'm very concerned about the recycling situation. I'm concerned if the definitions are changed, it could give Monument a lock. I think there's so many moving parts to this that it's better to have legal analysis done and expert opinion sought to see if there's a better way forward. If one of the major concerns is greenhouse gas, having things go all the way to Denver over mountain passes and then be shipped to China is a huge impact compared to our local center bailing things by type, and then most of it stays within the state of Utah. I think there's room for everyone to work together, and that's just not happened at all. And I think if something were to be decided tonight, it might be premature and cause negative repercussions. So I'm not sure. It's very confusing to me what exactly is being voted on and what the ramifications are of that. And I don't know if you guys are even clearer on that than I am, but I'm really hoping that we'll step back and just take the time. I wish when I, in the beginning, had suggested severing the recycling from the contract till everything could be worked out. That might have created a better environment than we have now. But the center's been there since '91. It's in the best shape ever. It's ready and willing. And it could be a compliment to any other thing. So thank you. Do I have to keep talking?
No.
I will if you want me to.
Thank you, Sarah. Barbara Hicks?
Is that how this works? Hi, good evening. I'd just like to encourage you guys to vote yes on this new ordinance regarding overnight accommodations. The county has paved the road for you. They just passed a similar ordinance. It took 2 times, but it passed 5-0. And I have to tell you, I felt such a sense of relief when it passed. It was like, thank goodness, you know, those of us that live here, we can catch our breath. You know, it has really been emotionally kind of crushing, you know, this development, seeing our rural town just, you know, kind of disappear before our eyes. And it was really a great sense of relief that I felt when the county passed their similar ordinance. And it was brave, and it was bold, and it was courageous. And because there was a lot of opposition from developers, current developers, future developers, I ask you to be bold and courageous as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other citizens to be heard?
Can I use my microphone now?
Bring it to me.
You could have redeemed it earlier. I just didn't know you had one.
I was waiting for somebody to say something.
All right. I'm here to encourage
Robert
you,
Hines.
yes, not to vote to strip people of their property rights. Basically, in essence, that's what's going on. I don't feel like this is going to bring us any closer. We're not going to gather for a group hug after this is all over. This is just going to create more division in the city and in the county. I feel like I'm personally being pigeonholed as an evil developer because I have a desire to develop my property for overnight lodging. I started out in Zachariah's office 2 years ago wanting to build long-term rentals on my property. I couldn't do it. The ordinance didn't allow for it. So after a conversation, and I said, what can I do? And he said, you can build a motel. So for the last year and a half or 2 years, I've proceeded in that direction and found investors to develop my property into overnight lodging. Now the rug's being pulled out from under me and a lot of other people. But I feel like I'm being grouped in with evil motel developers. And what a lot of people don't realize is these motels are privately owned. So I would urge you not to do what the county did. I will make a promise that you cannot legislate or force somebody into a bad business decision. And this is in part due to the housing shortage. We don't have enough affordable housing. We don't have enough low-income housing. I've been a landlord for 30 years in this community. I've lived here all my life. My family's been here for 107. I don't think you're going to legislate people into what you want. As far as affordable housing is a myth. Okay, until you legislate the contractor that's charging over $300 an hour per square foot, it can't be done. Even if you own the property. That's what steered me away from was the price to build. I can't debt service apartments in my lifetime and make them affordable. So that's a fantasy until you get a huge government grant or you legislate the contractor into charging a third what they charge. As far as low-income housing, that's even worse. Because my grandkids would be trying to pay the debt on that. So I'll make that promise to you right now that with my property in the middle of historic downtown Moab, I will never develop it into any kind of long-term housing. I would sooner let it sit empty for another 100 years.
Thank you. Kevin Walker.
I'd also like to encourage you to vote yes on the overnight accommodation ordinance that's in front of you. This has been a short process by planning standards, but long from the point of view of, community activists. And a lot of people have been to a lot of meetings, and there's been, the public comment has been overwhelmingly saying that things are going too fast in Moab. And in Moab, we often complain about things that are outside our control, like UTVs on our streets and how we can charge sales taxes and all those things. But planning and zoning is one thing we certainly can control. And so I applaud the Planning Commission and the City Council for, using the tools that you have available to try to make Moab a more livable place for all of us. So I think this is a big step forward. It's not going to be the first step. If things need adjustment in the future, that can be done, so we don't have to get it perfect right now. But I think, sort of changing it away from the use by right paradigm is a very important first step, and I'm urge you to vote yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else need to be heard? All righty. Okay, we are going to move on to old business 8.1, which is an ordinance 2019-21, authorizing a vacation of a portion of Emma Boulevard and amending the UTEX subdivision Plat B, Lot 14, Section 36, T25S, R21E, SLBM. Karen and I have recused ourselves on this. If there is a motion, I will entertain the motion. If the three of you feel like you need to have further discussion, I will ask Kaylin to lead that discussion, and Karen and I will step out.
I'd like time for discussion.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, I'd like time for discussion.
Okay. It's yours, Kaylin.
So would you like discussion before making a motion?
I don't care. I think Mike has a motion. He can make it now if he wants.
Okay, I will. I'm going to read it. I move to approve ordinance 2019-21, approving the vacation of a portion of Emma Boulevard by the city in exchange for a portion of the UTEX subdivision Plat B, Lot 14, Section 36, T25, SR21E, SLBM, as submitted, with the following addition. If the city were ever to proceed with the idea of constructing a one-way southbound road, that idea would have to return to council for approval. That is the only change I have to the motion. I have one other suggested change, a minor change to the ordinance to clarify when landscaping might be built, but I don't know when we should consider that, Mr. Chair.
If it's part of the ordinance, I think it should be included in your motion. So please propose the amendment.
Shall I continue?
Please.
Okay. In the ordinance text, Part E, as an echo, there is the final sentence of that paragraph reads, presently, landscaping and other improvements will be installed adjacent to portions of the proposed one-way road at such time as it is developed. I want to make that clear that, in fact, I'll just put it this way, that last sentence, I was moved that we make it read, landscaping and other improvements shall be installed as funding permits and need not wait for installation of the proposed one-way road. I am concluded, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ronnie. Discussion? Or would you like, it appears that Chuck is prepared to present.
Yeah, I was wondering if Chuck wanted to review, just because this has changed a little bit since the last time he came, and I think it's helpful since he has the visual there.
Yeah, Chuck, if nothing else, just let the audience know what we're talking about.
Sure. So on May 14th, there was a public hearing before council. We're proposing trade of some right-of-way along this area in exchange for a larger portion of easement here in lots 14, 15, and 16. We heard comments from the public. We worked with council. We looked at what the city really needed. And one of the primary drivers of this proposed vacation and exchange is to take our shared use path up to the highway so that it can be crossing the highway with a new hawk signal, which will be paid for and installed by UDOT as part of the Highway 191 widening project. And then the shared use path will be continued along the east side of the highway up to where it ends now in the vicinity of 500 West. So this revision to address many of the comments that we heard, as well as interaction with council and staff, us looking at it again, would be for the city to accept 36 feet of right-of-way, which would be the city's owned as fee simple right-of-way, and the city would then exchange a perpetual easement of 24-foot width down here to Prospector Village, which would be, allowed uses would be ingress, egress, parking, and utilities. In other words, it essentially makes those lots a little deeper, if you will, for parking if that was necessary for a business or utilities. And then that would allow 36 feet of, it would allow 36 feet of still owned public right-of-way for the shared use path, as well as if indeed council ever directed us to put in a one-lane road, it would be a low-speed road, probably 11-foot lanes, 10 to 15 miles per hour. It would still also maintain a 10 to 12-foot wide park strip, if you will, which maybe provides opportunities for things like bee-inspired gardens or other landscaping or features such as that in the vicinity of between the shared use path, probably in all likelihood, and the one-lane road, even though we don't have a design now or anything, but the remaining right-of-way would be there to do so.
Okay.
Did I cover everything?
Can you just, zoom out a little bit, because I think there's a little bit more to your
Yeah.
map that probably just doesn't get to show right now.
Sure, yes. There you go. And
Okay,
this,
I don't know if you
yeah,
could
the
shrink
easement
it.
would come down to Maxine. Oh, shrink
No.
it? Yeah.
Maybe, that's good, so it all shows. So I just didn't know if you wanted to say anything in the ordinance. There's a reference in item H to future plans for public parking. I didn't know if you wanted, one of you wanted to say something about that.
Sure. As part of the hotspot funding, UDOT, the legislature gave UDOT money to make available for dispersed parking throughout the city. Because some of the businesses along Highway 191 will lose some of their on-street parking when the widening occurs, we've been focused on trying to find opportunities to put in some parking facilities as a lease agreement with some of the property owners in this vicinity. And we are in discussions with several of the churches down there. Don't have agreements with any of them in place now, but that would provide an opportunity to access those parcels if council directed us to do so.
Thanks. I just felt like it's part of my job to say a little bit more about this. So one of the, and I'll use a technical term here, really sucky parts of this job is that there are times when we are called into closed session on items and totally illegal, legal, sorry, that's a Freudian slip. Legal. I'm good at those mistakes. But at the same time, very frustrating because I can't share with all of you the information I have. And again, legal, but I know a lot of you have questions about this. And so I did talk to the attorney about what I could and couldn't say. So I can tell you we have more information than you do that we can't share with you. And I can also tell you, because I know a question a lot of people had was, why don't you guys just leave it alone? We like the status quo, leave it. And I felt obliged to tell you that that wasn't an option. I think, so what will initially happen is that the bike lane will come through and it will connect. And I think there are probably, a lot of people, pedestrians, cyclists, who like the connectivity that'll offer. And it, will go connect to the parkway. Some of us would like to see more done to make this feel more beneficial to the community. So Chuck mentioned things like bee gardens. We've had some ideas, and I would just say if anybody in the community feels passionate about those or other ones, that if and when the road happens, that you come to us or that you hold us to some of this, and this is just me personally speaking, but that whole section of Emma that's going to be on the curve of the bike lane between Emma and Mevita, it's utterly my understanding and intention that that not ever be a through road. If I die tomorrow and there's another council here, I can't totally control what they do. But it is my understanding that there's interest in making that piece of land beneficial for the community, and different ideas are thrown out, like community gardens and things. But at any rate, personally, as someone who's interested in not just creating a concrete heat island, I'd like to see some benefit to serve residents, because I think a lot of what the community has asked for with this overnight accommodations changes, but also in other aspects of the changing city, is more that benefits the residents. So we don't know if the one-lane road will ever happen, but I feel passionately that the bike path should have shade on it. I'd love to see some benches. Bee garden, great. I also just think that it's a great opportunity, if people were so inclined, to really use the area as a demonstration area for some of the ideas we've been discussing, like green infrastructure, native plants, to really profile some of those ideas, because a lot of what we're being pressed to do as the climate changes, and Mike was talking about that earlier, is to adapt, and shade is part of that adaptation. And also now in terms of research about heat islands, having vegetation as opposed to bare ground or bare cement is also shown to create lower temperatures. So anyway, I just feel like this could really benefit the community if it is shaded and vegetated, and I could see people sitting there. But like I said, status quo not an option. Seems like there are some benefits to be had here, and I hope it can be done in a way that it serves the community in multiple ways, that makes people want to go out there and spend time, and puts in some of the shade that you guys see on other parts of the parkway.
Thanks, Ronnie, for filling in those details. Is there any further questions or discussion?
No, I don't have any for council.
Okay. In that case, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously, 3-0. Would you please retrieve our... Oh, okay. Quickly.
Run the show. She's not in.
We'll just blaze through this next item before they get back. It's done. You get both of them.
Okay. All righty, we will move on to 8-2. Ordinance 29-18, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Municipal Code, removing overnight accommodations as a permitted use and allowing established overnight accommodations to remain as legal uses in the C1, C2, C3, C4, RC, and SAR zones. Amending section 17.06, definitions 17.20, 17.21, 17.24, 17.27, 17.31, and 17.32. And Nora, before you start, I'm going to take a point of privilege here and encourage people to actually read the ordinance. While we are removing overnight rentals temporarily, Section E of this ordinance states, the city desires that new zoning regulations be developed to result in new overnight accommodations that better reflect the long-term interests of the city. And Section J said, this ordinance is consistent with the city's general plan, which expresses a desire to preserve the quality of life in Moab, the availability of affordable housing, and a diverse, resilient local economy. So we are not putting a hard stop on this. This is a step, and we want to assure that future overnight rentals succeed in our town. So I will turn this over to you, Nora.
Okay. This is largely similar to what you saw at your last meeting, but what I did, that was actually a great help to me and everyone else, I think, is Mike suggested that I put the ordinance in a strikeout red line format so that the actual text of the code that's being taken out is reflected and that the additions are shown in red so that you could really tell what was going to happen. And I've also done a clean copy that I provided to Summer without the red lines. So you certainly can make modifications tonight with any of the language, and I will take note of those, and we'll make sure that they get inserted or deleted as you wish. So the major change, other than the format, they're just some individual things as I was going through this exercise of strikeout and red lines. Some things that I wanted to clarify. And primarily it has to do with improvement of existing overnight accommodations to allow those improvements to be made, but not to increase the unit number at all, because I know we have people out there that have existing hotels that, for example, want to make their breakfast room bigger and just want to make things nicer, and we don't want to stop that. We want to really encourage that, but we don't want any additional units. And all of this is in anticipation that we will add back in overnight accommodations as a use that's permitted in some zones under certain conditions. And that's certainly our intent moving forward. So we We also created a definition of established overnight accommodations, and there's a map that goes along with that. There were some just wording changes I made, modifications to. We added some emphasis in a couple of the zones about multi-household units, where the zone already allowed multifamily units with a whole list of standards that they had to follow. We added, just for extra emphasis at the end, that multifamily cannot be overnight, multi-household dwellings cannot be used as overnight accommodations. And there was some concern expressed about the fact that maybe we should do that for all housing types rather than just be selective in multi-household. The only reason I did it that way was because there was already a laundry list of stuff that needed to apply. So I just for added emphasis, but certainly we could delete that if you want. It doesn't do anything materially. It's still pretty clear what we're doing. So those are really the major changes. And I'd be happy to address any of the questions you have, and again, happy to record any changes that you want to make. We've had a public hearing with the Planning Commission. They forwarded a positive recommendation. One of the things they added was a target date, and that the intent really is to show intent that we do intend to move forward on overnight accommodations and reinserting them in some of our zones or allowing them in some fashion. And the Planning Commission recommended a target date of October 31st. You may want to discuss that and take it out or change it or whatever, but that's what the Planning Commission recommended. What I anticipate is, I don't anticipate that by that time it will all be fixed. What I anticipate is that by that time, we will have begun putting overnight accommodations back in certain areas with development standards. And the Planning Commission Planning Commission and Council, we're hoping to do a joint work session soon so that we can talk about priorities and where we want to start. Planning Commission started at their last meeting with some ideas, but I think it's important for the two groups to get together. And we will do what we can in a short time frame. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you, and you can.
What is the pleasure of this council?
I don't know, does anyone need the clean version?
Yeah.
That would be great. I mean, I would love to see that, but also I'm just curious if we want to discuss this target date, because it seems a really difficult timeline for the Planning Commission to try to reach that by October 31st. That's really around the corner, and I know they're working their tail off as it is, so.
I'm opposed to a target date. I would much prefer the strong language that's already in there about urging staff to expedite, move quickly. But I don't think there's any way we can make a Halloween deadline, and I don't think it would be responsible to stick that in there. I mean, if it was the only thing that we as a council and planning commission and planning staff had to work on, maybe, but we got a lot of other obligations.
We do. I wondered about just moving it to the end of the year because, like Nora said, it's not all going to be done. But if we give ourselves the end of the year to show the legislature, when the legislature is in session in January, that we are working in good faith and that we have done X, Y, and Z in the 4 or 5 months since we've enacted this, that we are working toward reinstating overnight accommodations in those zones. It does say target date. It doesn't say that it has to be done.
I just sent you all via email a clean copy.
So, Madam Chair, if I may ask, our city manager, Mr. Linares is an attorney, and he has told us that he has still another potentially legal reason for not putting in that date. Maybe you could elaborate on that?
So one of the concerns we have is we want to act in good faith. We want to show that we're moving towards getting the land use code in a way that we can defend it in a way that it's enforceable. If we set a hard date of October 31st and we don't reach that date, it can create some legal issues for us if someone starts filing a lawsuit that we didn't meet the deadlines that we set for ourselves, that maybe we're not acting in good faith, and it just starts creating scenarios that we don't really want to put ourselves into. We would prefer as staff the hard language that's there. The end of the year is a great goal. We think that that's very reasonable. Halloween, just because of the public notice requirements that go into changing land use ordinances, would be extremely hard to meet if we had the stuff prepared relatively quickly, because we have to get it to public hearing, we have to get it before planning commission, before we can even bring it to you. I mean, just the timelines of once it's prepared to bring it forward, that would be tough to meet just with those windows. So I think Tani hit the nail on the head. We want to be able to show in good faith that we're working out of the problem that we are in. There's no doubt that we are in an overnight rental problem, that we have affordable housing problems, that we have infrastructure problems, and these are all real. We want to be able to show, though, that as we're moving forward, that we're making good faith efforts in all of them to come out of the problems that we have and how we're working forward. We want to be able to show in January, as we go to the legislature and ask for assistance and ask for help from the state level on how we're going to fix several of these problems, funding towards affordable housing, funding towards infrastructure problems, and how we can address those issues. We want to show that we're working in good faith efforts to solve our own problems. And so a hard deadline is problematic if we don't hit it. Suggested deadlines are better. Suggested deadlines that are towards the end of the year are more realistic. We would self-impose one as staff. If you didn't do anything other than pass this without a deadline, without suggestive language, if you didn't tell us another thing to do, we as staff would move towards having this done end of year anyways, because as we approach the legislature in January, we want to be able to have that in our pocket to present to them. So that would be a self-imposed goal upon ourselves regardless.
That would be my preference, because it just gives us a little more cover for unexpected things that may be coming at us that we don't know are coming, and we can schedule projects out now and use up every hour for the projects we know are there, but there are going to be some more that we don't know are coming at us. And to me, good faith has always been more about what you show that you're doing as opposed to what you say you're going to do. So to me, the verbiage of a target date means nothing or far less than what you can actually show me on paper that you've accomplished and how far you are down the road to getting somewhere. So I'm just going to put that out and let someone else speak. But
the problems we don't know within this issue alone are scary. Just the several different ways we can go forward and how overlays, the different ways overlays, text amendments within the own zones, just figuring out the road forward from here in this one problem is a huge issue.
even the suggestions of things that we'd like to work on in Section 6 are highly sophisticated, and I just don't want to sell the Planning Commission or the staff short, and certainly the residents, of the time it takes to put that together well.
Yeah, reasonable expectations are always better.
Do we face any legal issues if we don't put a date?
No, I don't think so, because of the way staff and council are going to perform going forward over the next 5 to 6 months.
But we can certainly give you directions as to
Direction's always great.
a verbal target date.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
So you could leave section, what's now section 4, in without a date, which is how it was originally drafted, certainly, or you could modify the language to say that some progress will be made. I don't know, that's, all that stuff is up to you guys, but we could, I would recommend leaving that section in, but we could take out or modify the date or modify the.
So I'd be in favor of removing the date, but certainly directing staff to proceed without undue delay. I'm still disappointed that we didn't get so far as to have some path forward for overnight accommodations in this code that we're considering this evening, but I understand the technical difficulties and staff limitations in achieving that, but certainly want to keep moving in that direction.
If I may, if the common perception is to say a target date of X means to most people, yeah, they're going to be done by date X, then I'm pretty nervous about the end of October. I've been doing this for a year and a half now, and I've seen how long it can take to do anything. And I'm quite certain, nor I've been impressed at how nicely things have come along since you've been here, which is great. But nonetheless, it seems to me, you guys in the audience should realize that our basic job is for the most part to reinstate uses where they were, but with new standards. And as I've been saying, for me, the tricky part is not to set the standards too low, because if we do, we'll be right back where we started, and the community doesn't want that.
6 months.
6 months.
Just continue, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. And we don't want to set the standards too high, too impossible, so that nothing ever gets built again. We're not trying to stop growth. What we are trying to do is get overnight accommodations that better suit the community's interest. And developing, and know that we are going to argue to the ends of the earth on exactly how to do it. And furthermore, it won't be just us. It's going to go back to Planning Commission. It's going to go through NORA. It's going to go through staff. It's going to go back and forth. It could go back and forth for C2, for C3, for C4, for so forth. And it's going to take a while. And I do think we owe it to the business community, to the town in general, to, as Ronnie has said, and Kaylin, as to keep momentum going. We don't want to let it drop, because that just invites reparations from the legislature.
Right.
And we don't want that.
No, we don't, and
So my recommendation would be to delete the target date, having said all of that.
I didn't hear what you said, Mike.
To do it, yeah.
I'm
I
sorry.
didn't hear what you said.
So my recommendation would be, as Kaylin said, to delete the target date clause.
I'm fine with that. Karen?
I am too.
Okay.
So you're saying just that one says, that one phrase, and with the target date of October 31st, 2019?
Yeah, I'll just take it out, and you are hereby asked very vociferously to continue work without undue delay.
Whatever you want to put in there is good.
No, I liked it like that.
I like the phrase without undue delay. I think that's great. Keeps the fire under our pants, so to speak.
Can we go back to Nora's question about, are we done with targets?
I think so, everybody seemed
Can we
okay.
go back to Nora's question about multi-household dwellings? I mean, I feel like it makes the document messy. Like, either you should be specifying no overnight accommodations in any forms of dwellings, or it makes it messy to have the multi-household ones in and not the other ones. So I'd prefer to either take it out, because I feel like it's already implied by the language we have on existing overnight accommodations and the map, or to make sure that the other forms of housing also have that designation. I don't know if anybody else has feelings about that.
I would support striking it. I feel like the rest of the ordinance makes it clear, and staff has indicated that it is clear without it.
It is.
Okay.
Can you clarify an improvements thing for me, Nora? So I understand the improvements language says, yes, you can do upgrades so long as you aren't adding a number of units. What constitutes a number of units? Like if I all of a sudden put, I don't know, more beds or sofa beds or bunk beds or something in my unit to accommodate more people, then you could argue that you're going to end up with a need for more parking, but you might not be changing the footprint. So is that just kind of all independent, everything that happens within? Are we only talking, we're not even really talking footprint here, right? Like I could change my restaurant or add a restaurant, so I could enlarge the footprint so long as the footprint wasn't in part housing units, I mean, or overnight
Or
rental
you didn't
units.
take away parking that is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, if you were to remodel and put in a love seat sofa sleeper, that, I mean, you could do that, anybody could do that today without any need for any kind of permits. And I would assume that that would continue. We're not trying to micromanage. We just don't, at this point in time, want new ones built, but we don't want to discourage people from being able to improve their property. So I tried to leave it as simple as possible. The county added a little bit of clarifying language, but not, it's basically the same intent.
Let me take another run at that. Does accommodation unit mean the unit as a whole, or does it mean, is a unit classified as a bedroom? So if it were
A rentable unit. So it could be a bedroom or a room. So you can't add, you wouldn't be able to add bedrooms because that would be additional, that are separately rented for sure.
but if it was if someone were to take a legal conforming 3-bedroom short-term rental, could they convert it into an 8-bedroom?
No.
A single rentable 8-bedroom unit,
No, because that would increase the number of units.
even though they're rented in aggregate and not individually.
But you're still increasing the number of units. You go from
You're
one
expanding
number
its
to
use.
another, right?
Okay, so that's clear to the two attorneys at the table that,
And hopefully this won't be in here for very long, right?
that is the intention, I believe.
Yeah,
But adding a pull-out couch is not considered adding another unit.
that's correct. I would not
Okay.
consider that.
We could go through the exercise of defining what a unit is. I mean, typically it would be some sleeping accommodations, and we could try to craft that kind of language for you if that's what you want to do.
We could do that subsequently and just do another revision to the code that deals with the definitions.
And we've done that elsewhere in the code when we've defined, for example, in the pad ordinance, when we defined what is a unit, we've defined it as a place with a bedroom, a bathroom, a living area, and a kitchen, for example.
And bike storage.
And bike storage, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I mean, you can go to that degree of detail if you'd like.
Not tonight necessarily, but you could direct us to do it. And we could come back with either further changes to this or just change the definition.
Definition.
So Nora, how about some example, like if I have 12 condos I rent overnight, can I change that to a 12 unit hotel? Just add a kitchen? I mean, we've gotten the more generic question of like, oh, could you change a campground to a hotel or vice versa if the number of units stayed the same? So just trying to ask all the weird devil's advocate questions.
Well, if you're not increasing the number of rooms and you're adding a microwave and a sink, you could certainly do that. You could do that today or anytime. If there's those kinds of interior modifications to a unit, it's not something that I think we want to jump right into at this point in time. I think we want to give people the flexibility to be able to make improvements to the building. And to the units. I mean, they could certainly upgrade them and put in microwaves and sinks, but.
I posed some written questions to you about the boundaries of the map. Have you had a chance to review those?
Well, the one that you mentioned was the in-towner. I think that's on there, but I certainly can make that modification. And then, so what we talked about was if there are modifications to the map that we find we need. So if somebody comes in and provides us evidence that they have, okay, two things. One is the map is based on a list of existing business licenses for nightly rentals in the commercial zones. In the residential zones, they're non-conforming. So none of the cross-hatching is in residential zones. We have recently updated that list. And so what I can do tomorrow probably, or Thursday morning, is make sure that it jives exactly with the list that we have, whether it's updated, just to make sure that we caught everything. And we could, Chris, you want to talk about a process whereby somebody could ask to get added to the map?
One of the things we talked about was you add language to the text of this amendment that creates a process whereby if somebody is inadvertently left off the list, or some existing property that qualifies is not listed, that they could petition for that. First, we don't know that that's the case. It's possible that that could come along. My recommendation to Nora was that if someone can come forward and say, look, I qualify and I should have been on, my property should have been specified here, we can add them to that exhibit as an additional text amendment at a later date. But rather than going through the exercise of defining what criteria the staff would apply at this stage prospectively, we can cross that bridge when and if we come to it. That was my recommendation.
And on the other hand, you could, again, direct us sort of as a follow-up, once this is done, to go back and look at adding language that makes that more specific, if that's your desire.
So I'd like to offer the opinion that I think it's fairly likely that for one reason or another, just like the reasons you guys have just been discussing, that we'll end up making minor mods to this ordinance in the next month or two, whatever, or longer. And I'm an engineer, folks, and we have an expression in the industry. Sometimes it's just time to shoot the engineers. And if you haven't been in the business, you won't appreciate that. But I'm saying that.
My brother's an engineer. Sometimes I'd like to shoot him.
Because we'll diddle to the ends of the earth with it, and sometimes you just need to get the product out the door. And for that reason, I am recommending, you guys can decide what you want to do. So we go ahead and pass this ordinance tonight with admittedly potential weaknesses in it and so forth, but hopefully I don't personally see anything in here that's egregious that really worries, that I'm going to lose any sleep over, that somebody's going to take advantage of and undermine what we're trying to do here.
Are you making a motion?
Yeah, I'd be
have
happy to, but
another change before you
I've
do
done
that.
2 or 3 tonight.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I know Kaylin had some suggested changes to what was section 6, I think it's section 4 now, on the considered criteria. And yeah, and I don't know that those, let me just compare here.
No, I didn't add them in because I didn't know if the rest of the council was interested in doing that.
Yeah, so let me see.
I believe,
Is that the standards we're going to be working on after?
I believe
Yeah.
I'm confused. It's still section 6, is it not?
On this printout, it's 4.
Oh.
Which one are you talking about? Which laws? This one, the date? Oh. So what is the correct? I'm looking, in mine it's 6. I don't know what it is. Section
The
6.
red line version?
In the red line, it's 4.
4,
Officially it's 4.
yes.
Okay. All right, well, I'd be happy to make move if that's all we're going to amend. But Kaylin, did you want to amend anything else in relating to multifamily?
So right now
dwellings?
it says, staff is directed to consider density and aesthetic criteria, landscaping, energy efficiency, buffering, and the mixing of office, retail, and residential uses with future overnight accommodations development. And there was a suggestion to add some additional criteria.
Yeah, I have that language here. Do you guys want me to read it?
Sure.
Kaylin, may I suggest if you want to propose that, then you make the motion and you can just put it all in one pocket.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay with adding that language. I was fine with it.
Yeah.
I move to approve ordinance 2019-18. I'm going to skip the, with the following amendments. In section 4, striking the language "and with a target date of October 31st, 2019, and adding to the end of the last sentence of section 4, water carrying capacity, existing infrastructure capacity, contribution to cumulative traffic,
Carrying capacity, infrastructure capacity, is that what you said?
yes, contribution to cumulative traffic, connectivity and contribution to non-motorized and micro vehicle transportation network, comma, height and view shed.
Okay. So
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, that's the motion.
I will second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Tawny, can I make one closing comment?
Sure.
So we've been in a lot of meetings, and I just feel like I need to say this in defense of my colleagues and planning commission members as well, and the staff, where we've been accused of doing a lot of things with property rights. And I just feel like I need to remind people that we were a council who brought the state property right ombudsman down to talk to us about property rights, and he's the preeminent expert in the state, the lead attorney, and I do feel like we've tried very hard to base our decisions on property rights, our knowledge of it, attorney's knowledge of it, the ombudsman's knowledge of it, and I just felt like I needed to say that.
Thank you. And we did. Okay. I think there are drinks at Nora's house afterwards. All righty, we will move on to 8.3, Ordinance 29-15, an ordinance amending the Moab City Municipal Code, Sections 8.04.010, pertaining to definitions, amending Section 8.04.020, mandatory collection, and Section 8.04.030, rates and charges. Rosemary.
I just want to say thank you for adding energy efficiency to that last code change. Okay, so what you have before you are two possible code changes. The first one is fairly straightforward. It's basically just adding into the code that part of mandatory collection includes residential recycling, with the option to opt out. And so that was already voted on in February. It's just adding that into the code. So we're just codifying something you already voted on. The other part of that option was updating the definitions for construction debris and organic waste and recyclable materials. And then the second option that we discussed last council was also possibly adding a revision to require remodels over 5,000 square feet to recycle 50% of asphalt, concrete, cardboard, metal, and wood from construction sites. And you had asked me to get in writing from LeGrand that they could actually take concrete, which I did, and I have that in writing now. And I also did some research on some other options. If we, some cities are now just requiring contractors to manage the waste on site, and it could be donated rather than them transporting it somewhere. And then this way you don't even have to think about where the end product is going. So that's an option too to consider. I did look at these other cities, and we had a 50% diversion, and a lot of the cities now are going up as high as 70%, 80%, and this isn't like California cities. This was Cook County, Illinois, Austin, Texas, Florida, Milwaukee. So they're at like 70 or 85% diversion. Some cities are doing it according to the value of the remodel or the building. And so those are just some considerations.
What is the pleasure of the council?
I have a question for Dr. Russo, if I may. So Rosemary, Sarah talked with me today, and she brought up a concern that what appeared to me to be a rather innocuous change in definitions and so forth. What's garbage, what's recycled waste, and so forth. Could be part of a potential future effort to try to ensure that, and forgive me, sir, if I'm saying this incorrectly, correct me, to lock the recycle center out of the recycling business, particularly when it comes to commercial accounts.
By giving monument a monopoly, that could be one of the negatives.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So is, maybe you can clarify for us, is there any such truth to that?
So in our code already, it says that we have a approved contractor. And in the franchise agreement, it says that they are solely responsible for the collection of solid waste and recycling. So it's in the code, and then the franchise agreement reflects that as well.
So, Joel and Chris, I identified, I think, some language that creates more ambiguity than I'd like. When I brought this up at our last meeting, you seemed a little reluctant to discuss it in an open meeting. Would you recommend that, and I feel like my questions haven't been answered, would you like to handle it in closed session, or?
I would. Sarah has also brought me a bunch of documents that I need to review as well to give you a better answer. So she has provided some legal documents that they need to be reviewed by Chris and I before we can go forward.
So would you recommend tabling at this time?
Can I add something, Joel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if you go to the code, under mandatory recycling, the first sentence, solid waste shall only be collected within the city limits by the approved contractor.
Solid waste.
So this, if we're going to debate this, then we're going to be debating in an open meeting, and Joel just indicated that he didn't want to do that, so.
One of the things I was going to say is that there's no rush to reform this. We've already awarded the contract. It's important that the city's ordinance mesh with the contract because we made certain representations to the contractor that the city is bound to. If the council has unresolved questions and we didn't get them resolved before this meeting, then it would be my recommendation to table this.
Well, and the documents Sarah's provided me, they need reviewed. They need looked at pretty thoroughly. They're not something she brought them in, I glanced at them and realized this isn't something I glance at and make a determination at.
Okay.
So I would suggest you table, and I don't think Chris has any objection to that.
I don't at all.
Council.
I would move to table then.
I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. We will table that. And we will move on to 8.4, Ordinance 2019-17, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Municipal Code Sections 10.04.230, unlawful parking, idling, or camping, 8B and 8C.
Okay, so for these code changes, we're just really looking at a shorter duration, and we had added in exemptions to the code. And based on your feedback over the past week, we changed service animals to include pets. And we added in Mike's terminology about motor-powered vehicles.
Can I, is it open to speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it, I mean, my concern about adding pets is that there's a sort of a sense of irresponsibility of having your pet in the car if it's 100 degrees anyways, and, or under, what was it, 0 degrees?
0 degrees.
I mean, and adding that in there, there's, like, having your pet is not a necessity at those temperatures. And so, I'm not super comfortable with, I mean, a service animal is a different situation. I mean, I'm just curious where you
You may
guys are
have
at.
to take your pet to the vet when it's 105 degrees and.
Yeah, but you would get out, like.
Yes, you
do.
would.
And your pet goes with you. I mean, I'm just curious where you guys were at with
Yeah,
that.
Joel, I put a question on the share sheet, and I didn't know if you had a chance to see it, but I was curious if the police department or animal control had input on that, because, you know, they, for example, are the ones who respond to pets locked in hot cars. And
The chief has been out of town. I went
Yeah.
to attempt to talk to the assistant chief, and I wasn't able to talk to him. Obviously, if we have canine units, they would be exempt from that, and they would be left in the vehicle. But I couldn't get any info from them as to whether or not they would have any feedback on if it was a private citizen, it's 103 degrees. I don't.
And you go into City Market to go grocery shopping and you keep your car on. I mean, that, according to this, that's.
that was kind of the concern that arose to me, because we're trying to get tourists, for example, but residents too, not to leave their animals in, it's mostly hot cars, but, you know, I'm sure it happens when it's cold too. So are we inadvertently giving them an out and allowing more idling? I mean, totally makes sense that yes, you have an exception when you're sitting in there with them. I don't know if it has more to do with when the pet's in the car with you versus when you're not in there with them. I don't know.
It was just.
Yeah.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I'm just thinking, if you take your pet to the vet and you run into 7-Eleven and get a cup of coffee, and it takes you 3 minutes instead of 2, I'm not talking about leaving them in there for hours. But,
I guess it's hard for me because I was taught that you shouldn't be leaving them in there. You should go home, and if you need coffee, that should be a separate, but I don't know. Somebody might
well,
have,
and,
yeah.
you know, it does say in the exemptions, idling is needed to operate heaters or air conditioners where the temperature is below 0 degrees
Yeah.
Fahrenheit or above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, as measured at the Moab airport and determined by the National Weather Service for the health or safety of a driver or passenger, including service animals. I mean, the same thing could apply if you had taken your mother to the doctor and you left her in the car because she wasn't well and you ran in and got a prescription. You're operating that for the health and safety of a passenger.
I would feel more comfortable striking pets, keeping service animals, but.
Well, the other option I guess we would have is to pass it without that change and then revisiting that line, you know, after we talk to animal control, but.
Okay. Madam Chair, may I offer my opinion on the matter? Okay. Well, two things. First of all, I don't have a problem with pets, and I think 2 minutes is. I've talked to you guys about this before, is over the top. I want to say for you guys in the audience, I don't like idling cars any better than you do. I never even use drive-throughs at restaurants and so forth. And so, but I submit that it was 4 hours and now we're down to well less than an hour, if not minutes. And so I submit that whatever we do, we're going to dramatically improve any air pollution problems, which is really what we should be after. here. And if you try to say you can't idle your car because your pet's in the car, and furthermore, you try to restrict it to 2 minutes. It appeals to my environmental sensibility, if you will, but there's half the town out here who's going to think this is the silliest cotton-picking thing they have ever heard of. And I really don't want to necessarily, for no particular reason, because this is not doing a thing for air pollution. It only appeals to your soul, if you will. Antagonize those folks who will see this as another overly authoritative usurpation of what city council can do. So I would prefer 20 minutes, for example. That'll at least give you the time to get through a drive-in line, even if I never use it. Okay.
Well, and the other thing I wonder about is enforcement. Is this really what we want law enforcement doing? Checking for people idling for more than 2 minutes?
Well, what they've done in the past is they've just gone and talked to they haven't issued any citations since we've had this on the books. They basically, but they have, when they go up to talk to, say, a truck driver, they say, this is in our code. I'm just giving you a warning. And that has worked fairly well for them to shut off their vehicles. So they need to have something to say, to talk to someone about. Yeah. And this will be part of a larger, it's not meant to be punitive, it's supposed to be part of a larger education campaign. Like, I think a lot of people don't know, parents when they're dropping off their kids, they don't know, oh yeah, I'm exposing my kids to all, these socks and knocks. Yeah. So it's just to raise the awareness.
Oh, I understand. I think that's great. And Kayla and I have talked a little bit, and Joel told us that he's already said that he'd be happy to put up entering idle-free zone, if I got that right, Joel, at each edge of town, to encourage people to do just exactly that sort of thing. I'm just prefer not to make it another imposition on something that really won't buy us anything when it comes to air pollution.
But it does buy you stuff. Because what happens is the knocks and socks bind with particulate matter, and it makes ground-level ozone. And so ground-level ozone is really bad, especially for people that have asthma. It exacerbates asthma. And so it's not without thought.
So, Rosemary, then what about, I'm just adding up all the people that are idling at any moment in town with all the people that are driving in town. And furthermore, I'm counting all the people that are idling at stoplights in town. And I just can't imagine that anybody that's going to change their behavior because of this ordinance is going to make any difference whatsoever in the air pollution. Have I got that wrong?
Well, some people are law-abiding citizens, so if they know that it's a law, they're not going to do it.
I would love it if people turned off their cars. It just annoys the daylights out of me. I'm just saying that just from a regulatory point of view, I just think it's a bit over the top, as I said. So but that's just my opinion. You guys may disagree. That's fine.
I just think bringing the awareness that it has an effect can have a trickle-down effect with the community.
Be fine.
And like Rosemary said, you're not going to have, our law enforcement is already stretched. To go and be punitive about it would be silly, but to have the awareness. At the state level, idling is a really big deal up in Salt Lake City. And you have to sit in an inversion when you go up to the state capitol for 10 minutes and you're like, I cannot wait to get back to Moab.
Think about all the people that are sitting, not that I want to bring up Arches, but all the people that are sitting waiting to get into Arches. Like if we had a no idling sign there and some people shut their cars off, that would help.
It would. I'm not knocking that.
Yeah.
I'm just reluctant about tagging it with 2 minutes, okay?
Well, I'm in favor of it. I know this version was based in part on what Logan and Salt Lake City have passed, and I've seen all the research they've done and the science behind it. And speaking as someone with multiple relatives with asthma and having seen people struggle to breathe, I think 2 minutes is sufficient.
I agree with Mike. I think it's excessive for this community. We have far lower population than the example cities, and we don't want to impose unnecessary regulations on our population. I think lowering it to 20 minutes would address the concerns about prolonged idling of trucks and their diesel engines. But I feel like in the almost 30 years that I've lived here, I've used to observe a lot more idling than I do now. I feel like the population is already moving in the direction that we want, and that we don't need to take a regulatory step at this time.
I tend to agree with Caitlin.
And I disagree. Our population for Grand County and Moab is 10,000, but we have close to 3 million visitors. So and they're coming in vehicles. Having the signs that we're idle-free, I think can make a big difference.
A lot of
And-
them come from communities with idling ordinances as well, or countries. Yeah.
So I would like to make a motion. Where are we? Sorry. To approve the revised amendments with shorter duration and set exemptions for idling.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. Motion fails 3-2.
I would like to move that we adopt the ordinance, in particular Part B, with the modifications of 20 minutes instead of 2, and to accept pets as well as service animals.
Yeah, you can.
Do that. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes 3-2.
Does that mean we get signs?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Rosemary.
Hey, Rosie.
Okay. I didn't make it by 8:30, but approval of bills against the city of Moab.
I thought that you had taken over this,
I hadn't because I was out of town.
and I didn't come prepared. If I could,
Can we do that next time?
Yes.
With
we
little,
can.
Finance director, they table the payment of bills, how will that affect you?
I will come over Friday and take care of it.
Okay, and
But
I'm
can I
happy
have a
to
motion?
coach as well.
Okay. Can you motion to table that?
Motion to table approval of bills against the city of Moab. I move to.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here.
Dottie, you're great.
I didn't have much.